Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me, and I'm also presenting my screen, so hopefully you should be able to be seeing something on your end. And today we're going to start a new software, so hopefully you've been taking your time to go through the Excel part. If this is your first class, I think you're good to go. And if not, then you know very well that for you to graduate in this class, you must do softwares, that is SPSS, State, and Advanced Excel. The calendar says we must a software program, and you have to invest a lot of your time so that we be on the same page. So let's talk about the content or what you are supposed to do in this session, so that as you proceed, you should know what you have achieved and what this course is all about. So this is quantitative analysis, and in quantitative analysis, our class is practice oriented. That means I will be able to demonstrate everything that I'm talking about here. And the reason why we have installed softwares for you is because we also want you to be doing the same, so that the class will qualify as practice oriented, and it's a hands-on course. And since it's a hands-on course, that means you should have the knowledge and skills that involve the all processes, starting from data collection, which we will refer as data entry processes, and we'll be able to see that today. So data entry is where your source of data comes from, and we will look at what are the procedures that are involved there, either the traditional method or the electronic method. And we'll also spend a lot of time in trying to make sure that regardless of where the data is coming from, you have a way of having it entered in a machine or in a computer. So we will call that as data entry. We also talk about data management, whereby we prepare that file before actual analysis. And in this case, you'll look at, do we have missing cases? Do we have duplicate cases? Do we have metadata? What are the data that are supposed to be analyzed? Which one are not supposed to be analyzed? And which are the inconsistencies that are there? So basically, you're preparing your data before you do the analysis. And I'm not going to talk about all the structure of or all the concept of data management, but we will have fun when we dive in the class. So data entry, both traditional method and electronic method. Data management, we have several procedures to do. We have now analysis, and analysis is where we're focusing more on getting insights from your data. And with analysis, we will focus more on descriptive and inferential. And the big deal here is, as much as we're saying it's a practical oriented class, we will focus more on interpretation. Can you be able to interpret all those statistical data or insights that the machine or the software is trying to give you? So you as a quantitative analyst, you become now the bridge between the consumers of your work and the computational part of it, which is the machine. Of course, we have to talk about reporting, and our sources of data will focus more on questionnaires as a tool of data collection, because there are different sources of data. But since this is a beginner class, then questionnaire will be our main tools. And most of the questionnaires that I'll be using in class, you can either access them in your student portal, or there's a folder that you have, and we'll see how to access them. So most of this class material, you already have them. And like I said, we'll be focusing with some questionnaires, surveys. So these surveys are some of the work that we did, and it's good that you deal with a situation that happened so that you benchmark on the same. If there's some lessons that were learned during the process, we'll also have a chance to understand that. So who are the target people? So if you're a lecturer in any of the university, then this is the place for you to be. We're going to blend in both of academics and also the technical part of it, which now computer comes in. And when you say computer now, the software is SPSS. Undergraduates, people who are beginners just trying to figure out their way into the space of data, I think this is a good place for you to understand data entry, management, and analysis at a beginner level. Also, postgraduate students, of course, you realize in academic work, there's a lot of projects that you, or even everyone must do a project before they actually graduate. And it entails a lot of concept to do with statistics and analysis. So also for inferential analysis, which comes in handy for postgraduate students, and this is the place to be. Public and voluntary sector, social researchers, project planners and managers, monitoring and evaluation, mid-level managers, and so forth. So as long as you're in a space whereby you're doing research, this is the place for you to be. And I think I will also take time later to also know the different domains that you come from. So if you are a project manager and you're here, I will also want to know so that as we move on with the class, I should be able to customize or to use example that fit into the different field that you come from. So what is SPSS? Because that's where we're starting. One, SPSS is an integrated computer program which enables users to read. And what are you reading? We're in the business of data. So we'll see how to put in data from a questionnaire. And now SPSS can be able to read those data that we key in. And our goal again is just to manipulate the data. And as we play around with that data, the software that will enable us to produce a wide range of reports. Of course, our goal again is to do a documentation. So SPSS is the software that will enable us to do that. And the reason why we're starting with the SPSS is because this one is a point and click. So in developing syntax is not as heavy as when we now develop into working with commands. So this one is more of a graphical user whereby we point and click and you get the result. So before I talk about the key to discuss and of this session, and like I said, this is the foundation to now you building up into other domains or other career paths. And at the end of this class, you should be able to understand and discuss on the roles of statistics, especially in data analysis. So data analysis is not statistics, and maths is not statistics. So it's time for us now to make sure we are in the same page in, as far as demystifying these concepts. So also be okay with we can graphics using SPSS. And then lastly, we will see how do you now transfer these results. If you're doing your research project, how do you transfer your analysis from the results output to your Microsoft Word, whereby now you can be able to develop a more like a report. And of course, we also try and write that report. So we'll try and see if you can. So when you talk about reporting, most of you are going to do the what you call chapter 4 and 5. That is more reporting. And if you look at reporting, you'll not be reporting your work on SPSS elements. So when I say chapter 4, you realize it talks about data analysis, interpretation, and the discussion of those findings, which are in line with our objective, which you said at the end of this class, you should be able to consolidate the SPSS outputs using now Microsoft Office, which apart from just writing this report, you also need to have some visualization, some graphs, and which are the tools that you use for drawing. So we'll also transfer our SPSS output to Excel, whereby we draw a chart like this. Then we also see how do we transfer that chart again from Excel to Microsoft Word so that you have a report for final consumption. So on the content, we'll introduce the SPSS. We'll talk about the different variables, and in terms of variables, we basically look at the type of variable or data structures. So variables are either in the form of numerics. We have floating points. Of course, we say numerics, you might have at some point to go deep and define what do you mean when you say numeric. Of course, numbers can either be floats, can be integers, or can be complex. If you're not working with variables that are numeric, you can talk about alphabetic variables, where we will commonly refer to them as strings in SPSS. And then lastly, we have Boolean. So we might not have a chance to talk about Boolean characters at this level, but as we move forward, we will also be comfortable the same. Of course, we will enter data. We have to label those data that we enter so that we correlate what are the values and the label behind it. And in this case, we said in the whole process of data collection or data entry, data management, and analysis, you realize it's not a one person's job. That's why labeling is important, so that there's a smooth communication all the way from the source of that data to the consumption or the analysis part of it. I don't have to go through all these documents. So you have this document with you. So make sure you get to read on the remaining parts. What are the benefits of attending this training? Of course, you're not just here to waste your time. There's some things you want to achieve. So go and I think you can review this part. So let me just talk about the certification part. At the end of this class, you will receive a certificate from our system. But for those who want to sit for IBM exams, you can go and check from the link provided here. And the dataset that we're using in class here are the ones that are used by IBM to set the exams. So that means it's up to you to decide, do you want to be certified by Dalot or IBM? And standards are still the same. Now that we have talked about the different areas that we're going to cover, which is data analysis, let's dive into class unless someone has a question for me. But where do we start with all these things? By now, I don't think there's anyone who should be having challenges with accessing classes. So in as far as the portal is concerned, I don't even need to go there and tell you how you should move around. But at least make sure at the end of every class, you mark that session as completed. Like today, we're doing introduction to SPSS. If you go to your portal right now, you will see an option of mark as completed. And of course, you can also have a chance to access tomorrow's session. So as far as accessing the class is concerned, I think we are in order in that case. And make sure the email address that you're using in that browser. So you should not be in the Google Meet that you're having or you're accessing classes with a different email. So the same email that you registered for your student account is the one that you'll be able to be admitted in class. So that you should not be complaining that you have not been admitted to class. You already have access to that class. So unless you're using a separate email is where now we'll say, oh, you have to be given access to that session. My class, you come early. So I'm giving you 5 minutes or 10 minutes to settle down. Past that, we call it a day. Just come to the next class or watch the recordings. I think that is in order. The files that I'm going to use in class, again, you can access it through the student portal, or you can go to your folder. So there's a folder in your desktop, download training material or download. This folder is the one we installed for you some files. So during installation of software, we downloaded some file into your computer. Go to those files and under the folder SPSS, you'll be able to see all the assignments together with any file that I'll be using in class. Also, the file that I'm going to talk about in these sessions, you can also find them in your portal. So if you go to SPSS folder, you will see the questionnaires that I'm going to have in class, which are 4 of them. You will also have assignments. And lastly, you have data files. I hope we're in the same page there. So how do you access softwares now that we have already installed for you those softwares? If you go to your search icon, just write SPSS. If you go to the search icon, you can write SPSS, and you will see 2 of them. So we have the Statistics 20 and the Authorization Wizard. I want you to right click on the IBM's SPSS Statistics 20, the one with the affirmation. See the one with affirmation? Pin to your taskbar. And what that means is you'll be able to access or to open this software from down here. So you don't have to keep on searching every time you want to use the software. And this one is not only on SPSS. I'm talking about almost all the software that you're working with. So if you are coming to my class, make sure you can easily access your information. Now, let's define some terminologies as I now introduce the class. And there are 4 things that you need to know as you move forward. We need to understand what is a variable. We need to understand what is a case. We need to understand what is variable view. We need also to understand what is data view. I said 4 things: variable, cases, variable view, data view. Let's start with variables. Makes you curious. Those things we call them attributes. So if today you decide to do a study at the University of Nairobi and you want to understand a few things that refer to them, of those students, different lives that is done, triggers you now to perform any research. We call them. So what are variables and what attributes? So we can define things or action that to understand. And if you want to understand questions, and this you put them in a tool called a questionnaire, or it can be a key informant interview guide, or even an observation checklist. But we're just saying there are tools that you will use to collect data. So all the questions that are in a questionnaire are the ones we refer to them as variables. The second part is cases. And now, if you have questions, it means you're expecting answers from the respondent. All the answers that you receive from those questions are the ones we refer to them as cases. So variables are questioned in a questionnaire. Cases are the answers you will get if you go and open your browser, your software, which you said you want to use SPSS, of course, give it time before you see something pops up. It's a heavy software, so it's going to take a while before you see something. We'll talk about the interface that we're seeing. The first one, of course, we're not going to use it in class, but at least it's good we understand what it's all about. And I'll start from the open and existing data source. So if you look here at the moment on my side, I have some files here. That means every file that I've worked with before, I can be able to access them from here. That's why it says I'm opening an existing data source. On the other side, I have an option to run a tutorial. I can also type in data. So if you go to run a tutorial, it means there's a lot of documentation on how you can even teach yourself these classes. So if you click on run a tutorial and then OK, you realize that my browser is now processing details, and I'm going to an IBM platform whereby now I can be able to access all the tutorials that I want. So there's a lot of documentation for you, and I think these are some of the things I'll leave you to have fun with them at your own free time, so that by the time you're having a class with me, you've already done your part. So that if I ask you at the end, do you have a question? Don't be the one. Don't just let it go. So you can also prompt, and I like this interface. So you can just search if it's regression. Just write there regression. And you should be good to go. Also, right now you don't need to seek help just from the IBM website. If you have a GPT account like what I'm presenting at the moment, I can ask any question here as I proceed with my analysis. So in terms of assistance, at this era and age, you don't have any reason not to know anything. You have all the necessary tools with you. It's just up to you to commit and make sure you get what you want. I think that's all in terms of running an existing tutorial. Let's go back. Apart from running an existing tutorial, you can also type in some data. Okay, I don't know where I think I've just closed the interface by mistake. But the other two parts that you need to know is on either writing an existing query or typing in an existing query. And that is a bit advanced, whereby if you are connecting your SPSS with the server, you will need to know some database language. And database languages are the ones we refer to them as query. So who uses that part? I said in this process of handling data, it's not a one person's job. So realize at some point you might go to the maybe IT department and request for the database expert to extract some data for you in your database. And for them, they will have to either run an existing query or write query to select that information that you want. But that is an advanced level. So in this class, we're going to start our session from here. And we need to define out the remaining two terminologies, which is data view and variable view. Now that you know what is a variable and also what is a case, so all the variables, you will enter them at the variable view. So it means all the questions in a questionnaire, you key them in this interface called variable view. All the answers that you'll be getting from those questions, the one now we refer to them as cases, you will enter them at the data view. So variable view is for variables, which are the questions. Data view is for answers, which you can also call them the response. So if you are to define what data entry is, we can say data entry is the process of transferring data from your research instrument or tools to the data view. So if you have piles of questionnaires with you and you want to know the age of those, maybe for instance, students at the university, the different courses that they're doing at the university, you will transfer the answers that you have in that piece of paper to this interface called data view. And that is the first thing we're going to do in class, whereby now we'll be using this questionnaire on NSSF. So there's NSSF contributor tool. You know where to get it. Just to clarify, either on the student portal or the download training material folder in your desktop. So we're going to key in this questionnaire, but like I said, in data entry, you have to understand the process that was used in that in the collection of that data. So if you're using, so we have two ways of collecting data. And first, let's talk about sources of data before we even say how do we collect it. So we have two main sources of data. We have primary sources, and then we also have secondary sources. For primary sources, we can say these are type of data that you're getting directly from your respondent. So you have a chance to interact with the person who's providing for you that data. Call it primary source. And some of the common tools that are used in collecting data directly from a respondent is like what I'm showing you here, a questionnaire. I mentioned about key informant interview guide. We have focus group discussion, and we also have observation checklist. If you're getting data that is stored from a certain platform or archived somewhere, it can be in a journal, it can be in a website. We call that now secondary. That means you're not directly interacting with the person who's providing for you those responses. And in terms of collecting primary, so let's start with primary. You can either opt for traditional methods or electronic methods. Traditional method, this is where you print papers or questionnaires and you now walk around and collect data by giving individual people and telling them, hey, fill this question for me. That's traditional method. I'm not so sure if people are still doing that, but if they are, I think it was some years back. Right now, a lot of people are diving into electronic platforms. That means there are platforms like Kobo, ODK, we have honor.io, we have Survey2Go, Survey CTO, AP Info, and so forth. So you also find out what are these platforms that I'm talking about, whereby instead of walking around with piece of papers, you can just code these questions into an Android device, and instead of now going around there with piece of paper, you can just walk in with your gadget and you have the data collected in real time. So there's a lot of advantages that comes in with the electronic data collection platform. I think that is subject to qualitative class, not here. So for me, I'm focused more with the details from this piece of paper to now our data view. We said, yeah, I will focus more again on two types of data or two types of questions. So we have those questions that a respondent is only tied to provide only one answer. A good example is gender. If you look at the variable gender, you can either be a male or a female. You cannot be both. So we'll see how do you key in. This one I will call them single select. Those questions that you only select one answer. We also have a question like on section B, and I want you to go through this questionnaire, all the questions, so that you also understand what is the context of this data that you're collecting. What are the questions that are asked? How do you frame these questions? So you have a lot to do before our class tomorrow. So make sure you understand this questionnaire better. If you look at section B on awareness, there's the question of which were your sources of awareness about NSSF. And someone might have heard about NSSF through different platforms. So this questionnaire or this question doesn't tie the respondent to only one answer, but you can still select radio and be the same person who's also selecting a TV, and we will see how do we make sense out of such type of questions. So we call these questions, we call them multiple select questions. So in as far as data entry is concerned, we should be okay with single select and also multiple select. Before we dive into simple select, you should understand also on what we refer as metadata. And metadata, of course, right now maybe you might be wondering why did I start by talking about gender instead of serial number? Serial number was not here for decoration, but such information like serial number, date of the interview, also name of the interviewer, we call them metadata, which basically means those details that are only useful during the data collection process. And once you're done with your fieldwork, you realize it might not be necessary for you again to sit down and say, I'm doing data entry for date. Nobody will come and ask you to analyze serial number for them. So these are data that are only useful during the data collection process. So when you're coding this or such type of questionnaire, you realize the first question that you will key in is on gender, because gender is a variable that you would want to understand the insights about it. So you want to know what is the gender distribution of your population. How do we code questions? Now that you said we code question at the variable view, there are two ways of coding questions. One, you can either use the question number, because all question numbers are unique. So P1 is unique from P2. The software can be able to differentiate between the two. Or you can assign names to your variables, and then those variables are now the representation that you're going to have in your software. So for example, my first variable, I want it to be gender. So I will write there gender. So I said I can either use variable name or I can give it some, I can use question number to identify my variable. Gender, I would also need to talk about the type. So we said every variable you create, you must say what type of variable is it. Are you talking about a string or is it a numeric? So you can select that from the second column. So once you click at the end of that cell, you have an option of either picking numeric or string, but there are other variable types. But in most instances, you realize you will be working with either numeric or string characters. So what are the difference between numeric and string? We said all the variables that the response you get are numbers, they fall under the category numeric. All the variables that the answers you get are in alphabetic characters, those variables we refer to them as string. So if you collect, let's say, individual's age or age of the respondent, somebody tells you 24. So 24 is a number. That means age will be numeric. If you're collecting gender, for instance, you realize somebody can either be a male or a female. So gender is a string because you are expecting a person to be a male or a female. But at this level, you're not just coding your variable, you're also trying to communicate to the software. Both of you are supposed to be on the same page. And you should know that software only understand numbers. You don't understand English. So what do you do with a variable like gender, now that the software doesn't know what is male and what is female? So we're going to introduce values, whereby you say let the value of 1 represent the grouping male, and let the value of 2 to represent the group.
I was looking for a program that could enhance my strategic thinking.